Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 108, noes 0.
The bill is passed.
Senate 7536A, Rules Report Number 97, Senator Seward, an act to amend the insurance law.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote. Say what?
Call it and go back to Mr. Murray.
Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 93, noes 19.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you. We had a Senate sub yesterday, so we had to pull Rules Report 228 on page 13 by Mr. Titone. I'd like to put it back on the floor.
Assembly 7737A, Rules Report Number 228. Mr. Titone, an act to amend the navigation law.
On a motion by Mr. Titone, the Senate bill is before the House. The Senate bill is advanced. Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 115, noes 0.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to now take up Rules Report 360 on page 30 by Mr. O'Donnell.
Assembly 9939, Rules Report Number 360. Mr. O'Donnell, an act to amend the correction law.
Mr. O'Donnell, an explanation is requested.
Certainly. About a year ago, there was a prison break from the Clinton Correctional Facility in Janet Dupree's district. Clinton Correctional Facility is a Class A maximum security prison with a very, very large wall. I was notified of the prison break not by the second floor, but by Janet Dupree herself, who called me to tell me that there were two murderers wandering the North Country in the neighborhood where she lives. Subsequent to that, those two inmates were captured. One was killed in the capture. The other one was recaptured and is currently at another correctional institution. However, it raised very serious and difficult questions about the ways the prisons are run, whether or not there's oversight, who is conducting investigations, and the way those investigations are conducted. To that end, my committee did a hearing in December where we invited people from across the world to come to us and tell us how they do correctional oversight. At said hearing, we learned that they have different models, but the one model that seemed most successful was the creation of an ombudsman. What that job would be the ability of an outside entity to conduct investigations about the state and systems in the prison system. It is not a new idea. It exists across the country. It exists in California. It exists in Hawaii, among other states. I'm looking forward to my visit to Hawaii to go visit them and learn how the oversight works in Hawaii. I've not gotten that approved yet, Mr. Barara, just so you know. It is also, that is what is done in Canada and England and Wales. We then drafted a bill modeled on the state of California, which would create such an office. It would create a correctional oversight board whose job would be to appoint the ombudsman. It would give powers to the ombudsman to conduct investigations. It gives them power to take complaints on misconduct and report and give reports back to the legislature as well as to the governor. The duties under this for docs would be they were required to notify the ombudsman of any unusual incidences or criminal activity. They must respond in writing to recommendations made by the ombudsman, and it makes it a misdemeanor to intentionally obstruct the investigation. I had no expectation that this bill would be on this calendar or being debated at this time because we did not have the report from the Inspector General. I expected the Inspector General to give us the report on July 3rd. She did not. She gave us the report on the one-year anniversary of the prison break. This 150-page report is an extraordinary document containing extraordinary information about system-wide failures within the Department of Corrections to police itself. It includes, for those of you who don't recall, 2 employees who have been indicted and sent to prison for their conduct in smuggling things in. It concluded wholesale abrogation of duties in searching people when coming in and going out of the prison. And most importantly, it included a very large segment of people who worked there who were failing to do their job. Maximum A prisons are very serious places with serious sets of rules, including 2 or 3 times a night where bed checks are required to be done. It appears that the digging that was done in the bowels of this correctional institution went on for 7 months, without the people whose job it is to make sure those prisoners were in bed doing their jobs. In the end, the Inspector General concluded that the Docks Department does not have the ability to police itself, that the Inspector General's office did not do its job. In fact, both of the employees, complaints were filed establishing that they were having inappropriate contact with inmates, and both of those claims they failed to investigate. So that is what the bill does. It creates an ombudsman model based on California to have oversight of the state prison system. Thank you, Mr. McKevitt, for your time.
Mr. McKevitt.
Will the sponsor yield for a few questions,
Will
please?
you yield, Mr. O'Donnell?
With pleasure.
Absolutely, he will yield.
You mentioned the report that the Inspector General conducted, and I have to admit to you, it's one of the more comprehensive reports that I've seen in quite some time, reviewing the numerous failings in the dock system. But just to go on her recommendations on this point, does she, in her report, recommend the creation of an ombudsman and the type of oversight which you are doing in this bill?
Unfortunately, she never called me during the conducting of this investigation. She calls for her office to have said oversight, and she concludes that DOCS is incapable of doing itself and suggests that an outside entity, an outside office in the Inspector General's office. That is certainly one way to do it. My bill does it a slightly different way.
That is certainly one of the recommendations she does indicate, is that she was creating a unit within her office which is specifically designed and trained to audit and monitor DOC's integrity and operations. But she also recommended, you just want to explain, what is the Office of Special Investigations, which is already contained with the DOCs? Can you explain what that is exactly?
Oh, with pleasure, Mr. McKevitt. So there was an Office of Inspector General within DOCS. It was called the IGs, and the IGs conducted investigations. They were primarily former corrections officers. Many of them would sometimes move from one role to the other in doing their investigations. When the escape occurred, DOCS renamed the Inspector General's office, and it's now called the Office of Special Investigations. As I've said before, just because I bought a pair of skinny jeans doesn't mean I'm skinny. You know what I'm saying, Tom? And so changing the name of something that doesn't work doesn't necessarily make it work better just because you called it something different.
We'll try to use other analogies next time, but we'll focus on that. So, but
It's been such a fun day for me, Tommy. I'm having a good time. Go ahead, yes.
So my point is that in her conclusions, the Inspector General, she does not recommend eliminating OSI. Instead, what she recommended that OSI be restructured to ensure the quality and integrity of investigations. And I think the biggest issue she had is that many of the OSI staff were former correctional officers and could at one point be returned to becoming a correctional officer. So the problem was you had former colleagues of correctional officers being the investigators with the ability to someday return to that. So I think what her alternative is not to not have the oversight within DOCS for the OSI, but make sure you had, I guess, investigators who would not come from that background and return to that background to, I think, have more independence, at least in their experience, and the ability for reassignment. I think that's what I understood she was recommending.
Which is why I'm suggesting an entirely separate agency to eliminate that possibility. As I said in my explanation, I didn't make this up. This exists in England, Wales, Canada, California, Hawaii, Indiana, and we had testimony from those very people who explained why it worked better, that there was that distance between the two. I don't know whether or not the Inspector General ever considered the ombudsman model. I'd be happy to have a conversation with her anytime she likes.
Just going on to the role that you envision for the Ombudsman Office, how does that differ from what the Commissioner of Correction does? And would this somehow replace or eradicate what the responsibilities are of the Commissioner of Correction?
The State Commission on Corrections has a number of different authorities, some of which will be replaced and some will remain. They have oversight over the conditions in New York City jails, which are not the prisons. That's where the county local jails where people are held. They do inspections, they issue rules and regulations and say, these are the parameters of what a jail can and cannot be. They will retain that function. The other function that they have, which had to do with oversight of prisons, will be eliminated and put into the Office of the Ombudsman.
Do you have any idea at this point what type of staffing or what type of budget this would have? Only because, some of the abilities you have there is, for example, the Ombudsman would be able to place staff members as he or she deems appropriate at Myers and any correctional facility. So, theoretically, you may have one in every correctional facility, so you can really just lay out what you envision what the staffing capabilities would be as a whole. It's more than just an ombudsman, a couple of staff people. This could be many on top of that.
The ombudsman would have staff, and the staff would be able to do that and be on site. That is very true. In terms of actual direct cost, it would be a guesstimate. We modeled it after California and the roles that the California ombudsman has. And if you match their prison population to our prison population, it could be estimated for $7 million. I expect it would cost less than that, and I also would expect that it would save money in the DOC's budget because they would no longer need an Office of Special Investigations or IG or the same number of employees. So it would shift the focus away from them investigating themselves to an outside entity who would have their own investigators.
I see one of the functions you would have for the ombudsman is when the Commissioner of DOCs appoints a superintendent. Can you, Frisco, lay out what role the ombudsman would have, I guess, the interview of candidates, and if the ombudsman is somehow dissatisfied with a superintendent appointee under your bill?
It's entirely advisory, and they make recommendations. And so the idea would be that if there was an outside party who was regularly in X prison, right, and had interactions and relationships and knowledge of the operation of X prison, that when a superintendent was appointed for X, that they might be able to rely upon their knowledge of that prison to make a recommendation. It is not binding.
But once again, it seems like the issue you have here is whether the commissioner is at the outset appointing a superintendent who is not qualified. And is in your experience that a problem that DOCS is appointing unqualified superintendents? Certainly, when a person becomes superintendent, we can say that their job performance would not be up to what we would deem appropriate removal, but is there a problem with who are appointed in the first place?
I certainly can understand, given where you live, how far you are away from the prisons. Yeah. And so it's a long trip. I've been at 28 of them, okay, in my time as corrections chair. Superintendents are often like high schools. If you get a good principal, you get a good high school. You get a good superintendent, you have a better joint, okay? So in the end, the question isn't whether or not they are or they aren't. The question is, are they the best person suited for that individual environment? Dale Artis, please, Jen, if I get his name wrong, is currently the superintendent of Attica, and he's an extraordinarily talented, extraordinarily knowledgeable man about the way prisons are run. And you know that the minute you stand next to him when you walk through the prison. So in the end, some are good and some are better, and some are less good and less better. I'm not trying to micromanage what that is. I'm just trying to say that if we're going to spend the money to get outside people looking at this particular problem, that they may be able to weigh in a way that would be helpful for the superintendent or the acting superintendent to do their job.
I want to focus on a part of the bill on page 16 where it addresses the issue of the Attorney General conducting their own criminal investigation in this. And I believe starting on line 34, what it provides is that it allows the Attorney General to investigate the commission of any criminal offense and to prosecute any person or persons believed to have committed such offense. So do you envision that analogous to what the governor's done when there is a fatality of a civilian at the hands of a police officer and essentially the district attorney's ability to prosecute has been taken by the governor? Does this bill do the same thing to local district attorneys regarding offenses at prisons?
No, it does not.
Okay.
And what I would say is there are some states where they have ombudsmen, where they have prosecutorial powers. It was brought to my attention that constitutionally that might not be permitted, and the Attorney General's office, although not in favor or against this bill, expressed concern that the bill not be written in such a way that would undermine their authority. So I don't believe this bill gives them any more or less authority than they have currently.
So in other words, you would envision that under your bill there would still be concurrent jurisdiction between the local county district attorney and the Attorney General's office regarding these types of offenses?
This bill does not remove criminal jurisdiction from anyone.
Just curious, so on line 40 through 39 through 41, it states the Attorney General may only exercise the jurisdiction provided by a subdivision upon written finding that such jurisdiction is necessary, and then you give a number of factors regarding resources and ability to provide confidence in the public. Who makes that written finding? Who actually issues that?
Well, the idea was to have the Ombudsman's office have the authority to make some judgments about what would be best and not make it mandatory, i.e., if you wrote a bill that said they only could, that would remove jurisdiction from somebody else, or if you wrote a bill saying only they could, then you would be doing the same thing. It was only designed to provide guidance to the Ombudsman about the criminal prosecution component of what goes on.
Only because it's just not clear to me in the language. So the person making the written finding that the Attorney General should have jurisdiction, would that be the Ombudsman making that written finding, or is it the Attorney General himself making the written finding?
The answer is the Attorney General.
Okay, so I just make sure. So the Attorney General will then be issuing on himself, saying that he's going to determine that he's going to go and do his own investigation.
Correct.
Okay, and the only reason why I think that's different is that right now, ordinarily for an Attorney General to go in such matters, is the governor who makes a determination. A governor can remove a district attorney from the jurisdiction of a case and say, I'm now going to appoint the Attorney General. Ordinarily, the Attorney General does not, sua sponte on his own, going to make that type of decision.
Right, but as you are well aware, the Attorney General is the attorney for the entire state of New York and represents all those state agencies. This is creating a somewhat different model in terms of what this office is and what it does. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't step on the Attorney General's toes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect on the 365th day.
Clerk will record the vote. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 88, noes 39.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to give the members the next 5 bills I'd like to take up in this order. The first being Rules Report 282 on page 16 by Mr. Lenthal, followed by calendar number 751 on page 85 by Mr. Bronson. We'll follow that with Rules Report 124 on page 8 by Ms. Robinson. Then calendar number 225 on page 42 by Ms. Rosenthal. And then the last in this group, Rules Report 195 on page 12 by Ms. People-Stokes.
Clerk will read.
Assembly 7698A, Rules Report Number 282. Mr. Lenthal, an act to amend the criminal procedure law and the judiciary law.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
Clerk will record the vote.